All right, Matt, are you ready?
I am ready.
I'll give you a little introduction. We'll get started here. This is PhillyPoSH for August 7th, 2014, and we're delighted tonight to have Matt Wrock presenting for us a little bit on a project that he founded called Boxstarter, and he's also a contributor to Chocolatey. Matt's been around for 15 years doing large-scale automation, and with that said, Matt, please go ahead and take it away.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be presenting this stuff. I'm pretty excited about it, and hopefully this will be something that everybody finds informative. So what we're going to be talking about, as you mentioned, I'm going to kind of give you a primer on Boxstarter for those of you who haven't seen it or used it. We'll walk through some of the typical use cases, and we'll kind of use that as a springboard to talk about various testing techniques and patterns out in the automation space for testing automation. While things like configuration management have been out there for I'd say a while now, are fairly new to the Windows world. The testing in this space is fairly new, and I think that as we begin to automate more and more, testing becomes more and more important. I'm sure we've all heard the term infrastructure as code. So essentially, we're treating our machines as pieces of code, and just like we treat our pieces of software, it needs to be tested just like anything else. So I'm going to walk through some of the techniques that I've been using and share those with you. So let's start off talking about Boxstarter. So for complete information on Boxstarter, you'd want to go to boxstarter.org. Boxstarter is a project that I started about two and a half years ago with the intent of making my laptop or desktop or whatever machine I'm on, VM, repaves, smooth and with no drama, let's just say that. So typically in the past, I had found that repaving could possibly take a day of productivity away. I'd have to remember all the stuff that I want to reinstall. Sometimes I couldn't remember. So Boxstarter is a tool for doing that, doing it locally on the same box. It manages some things that are unique to Windows as far as lots of reboots, Windows updates. It can be done remotely. We'll be looking at both local and remote installs. Boxstarter is a Windows-only solution, and it's almost entirely written in PowerShell. It was a great opportunity for me to learn PowerShell, and it's funny if you look at the kind of the Git history of Boxstarter, you'll see my you'll see the learning curve basically go up. Some of the older stuff is a lot of write hosts and a lot of the newer stuff, trying to make more, take advantage more of the pipeline and things like that. And it's also leverages Chocolatey. Not sure about how many of you here are familiar with Chocolatey. I'm not going to go into detail. We'll actually see it in action. Chocolatey is a package management system for silently installing various pieces of software. There's currently about 1,000 packages on the Chocolatey repo, but we'll actually watch that in action. So let's start off by, I'm going to bring up my VM here, and I'm going to kind of show you what I think is the most popular use case of Boxstarter. Actually, let me first bring up a gist. So this is GitHub, just.github.com, .org, and here is a typical Boxstarter script. This is a fairly lightweight script. The things that you're going to be seeing tonight are going to be fairly lightweight, just simply in the interest of time. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Well, let's take a look and see what it's doing. So this is going to set my PowerShell execution policy to unrestricted, because I'm okay with that. This is going to make Windows Explorer usable to me. So this is something every single time I hop on a new box, almost I have to set all these Windows Explorer options. This does it for me. There's several of these types of functions in Boxstarter, things like switching the from boot to desktop, making PowerShell instead of the traditional command line, the thing that comes up in the WinX menu, things like that. It's going to enable remote desktop. It's going to use Chocolatey. These are Chocolatey commands to install these applications. Console 2 is my favorite command line console. Sublime Text 3, my favorite text editor. And it's going to create, it's going to pin them to the desktop for me. And it's going to associate text files with Sublime Text. And note that this is just PowerShell. Some of these are functions imported by Chocolatey or Boxstarter, but I could literally write any PowerShell I need to do whatever I need to do to set up my machine. So I'm going to, actually I don't want to copy the text, I want to copy the URL. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to go to my VM. And in here, so there's no software installed on this machine. This is a brand new Windows install, and I'm going to go to HTTP package /URL question mark. I'm going to paste that guy in. And so what's happening now is a one-click app just installed from Boxstarter.org, and it's going to go ahead and it's initializing now. So basically, it's downloading several PowerShell modules that's included with Boxstarter. It's asking for my password because if at any point in the install, if it senses a pending reboot and it's about to do an operation that could possibly be disrupted by a pending reboot, it's going to go ahead and reboot my machine, and then it's going to need to re-log in with my credentials. It already has my username. It just uses the username that's logged in. I'm going to give it my password, and it's going to get started. Well, so I have been having for whatever. So you see, it's restarting my computer for whatever reason. Today I've been having some issues with this VM, so I'm going to hope for the best. But my machine crashed about a couple hours before this. For some reason, this VM image it's doing a couple strange things. But there's plenty of stuff to look at. And so as you can see, it's logged back in. It's logging back on here. I'm going to go in and it's restarting. So what it does is it basically puts its script in the startup scripts, so that way when it logs back in, everything is up and ready. It disables Windows updates because, especially on a fresh computer. Now I did go ahead and update this with Windows updates just because I didn't. Sometimes it can slow down the installation process, and I wanted these installs to be essentially as quick as possible. So you're seeing it's going through, and it just restarted the Windows process because when it made those adjustments to Windows Explorer, it has to do that for those to kick in. Installed Console 2. Right now it's downloading Sublime Text 3, and now it should be installing Sublime Text 3. And okay, now it's associating the text files with Sublime. So when I double click on a text file, it brings Sublime instead of Notepad, and you see I've got my Sublime icon. So that's essentially how that works. It's a great way to, especially a package like this. I might have to work on several Windows VMs. I know that I always want my favorite text editor and command console on there, and now I've with one URL, I've got those. So the problem with this, in terms of simplicity, is I'm never going to remember that URL, that gist URL that I typed in, and I don't want to have to. I could get on the box, I could go to gist.github, I could find the gist and copy it. But ideally, what I would want to do is type in boxstarter.org, whack package, whack an actual package name, and have it go to a well-known package repository and get it that way. That would be much more easier for me to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through how to actually create an actual package and publish that package, and then we're going to use that to jump into how we would test that. So I'm going to bring up the command line. I'm going to shut this down. All right. So first thing I'm going to do, let me move this guy so it doesn't get distracting. And let's see. So the first thing I have to do is I have to tell Boxstarter where my local repository is. Boxstarter has the notion of a package repository, and it basically just it sets a setting in Boxstarter, and then any Boxstarter command that I issue that affects packages, for example, building packages or creating packages or installing packages, can reference that location. So I'm telling it it's actually right where I am. I could give it this absolute file path, or I could just do it like this and give it a relative file path. So now it knows where I am. I can confirm that by basically Boxstarter. When the modules import themselves, it also sets this global variable, and this kind of tells you where some things are for Boxstarter. For example, it tells me that it's logging to this particular path, that right now reboots are okay, so I can tell Boxstarter not to reboot things. So now it knows where my repo is, and I'm going to bring that up in, see, it's one of these guys. Yeah, here we go. So here it is. This is an empty repo. The only folder that it has is this Boxstarter scripts folder. This is something that I set up this repo a little earlier, but there's a command that you can issue that basically initializes the repository with these scripts. These are scripts that you could use with a build system, and we'll take a look at how this can be integrated with a continuous integration system in a bit, and how these scripts are consumed. But there's no packages in here, so I want to create a package.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to make the script or your text a little bit bigger?
Oh, let's see here. Is text in here? Oh. Let's see. That's not what I want. Oh, I want. Where are you? Here we go. Is that better? How's that? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. I see your text. That's good for you. Okay. Cool. So so now I'm going to go ahead and create the repository. So let me just paste the script. If you haven't noticed, or you may notice eventually, but I am an absolute horrible typist. So I've tried to make it so I can just copy and paste these guys in here. So this is going to create a package. So new Boxstarter package. The name of my package is going to be Wrock Light. And it's kind of a lightweight package. It's going to get a description, and what this path is going to do is it's basically, when it sets up this package, it's going to pull in the contents of this path. This is where I put Sublime Text 3, and this is where my Sublime Text 3 plugins and settings, all that stuff is. And I might want to actually include that in my package, so that way when I install Sublime, I don't just get the vanilla Sublime, but I also get it with all my settings intact. So I'm going to go ahead and issue that. Now, if you may have noticed, and you may or may not be able to see this if you couldn't see the command line text, this guy, Wrock Light, it just created this directory. And essentially what it did was it created kind of a scaffolding of a package. So here's the Sublime Text 3. So here's all my Sublime goodies that it pulled over. And every single Boxstarter package, and let me just say, when I say Boxstarter package, a Boxstarter package is basically a Chocolatey package. And a Chocolatey package is basically a NuGet package. I'm not going to go into the details of what all those are and what the differences are. I have links in my deck that I'll share that has a lot of information on those various topics. But for those of you that are familiar, that may set some context. So this is what's in my actual script. Again, this is just plain old PowerShell. Right now, essentially, this package can build and I can install it, but it won't really do anything. It would just message back to me that that I was successful. So I want to actually put some script in here. So let's see here. I'm going to grab this. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and so here I've got some script. This is mainly a copy of what we did before with just a little bit extra. This is going to essentially copy those files, the Sublime Text files, to where Sublime Text expects to see them. What I'm also going to do for my command line console is I'm going to copy over its config file. It's just a single file. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this guy over, and you can see here it is. This is my this is my console configuration file. So this is everything I need. Here's my this is my manifest. So every single package is going to have one of these that provides just essentially a description of the package. This is an incredibly minimal manifest. The manifests are called new specs for those unfamiliar with NuGet. I could have a lot more metadata in here, but this is really all I need. I'm going to go ahead and up this version just because I think that I might have another version of this out there. Save that. And so this is my package source. I can't install this package as is. I need to have an actual, what's called a new package file, or a new peg file, as some people call it. It's essentially the built version of the script, or it's basically a zip file with a different extension. So I'm going to go back to my command line, and I'm going to invoke Boxstarter build. Give it the name of my package, which is Wrock. I can also say -all if I want to just go ahead and build every single package in my repository, which wouldn't be horrible now since this is really the only package I have. So there we go. It's created a package for me. I can see that package right here. Ooh, that looks like a good package. And that's the file that it's going to use to copy over. So now let's go ahead and install this package. And we're going to install this package a little differently from the last one. Let me grab another bit of text here. Hold on. All right, so let's take a little look at this. This is going to install it. So I'm on my host, and this is going to install it on that guest. This is actually two commands. One command being piped into another. Enable Boxstarter VM. So what that's going to do, and this is if you already have a VM that's got PowerShell remoting all set up, you may not even need to use this command. So this Boxstarter assumes that nothing's been done to this machine. This is a client SKU, Windows box. It may be that that out of the box, PowerShell remoting isn't turned on, and so it's going to do some checks, and it's going to actually enable remoting on that box, so that it can communicate with it. And you may or may not be a domain. It knows all the the ins and outs of all that stuff and exactly what it needs to set for what scenario. Yeah, I'm not using the built-in administrator account, so it's going to do things like set the local access token. It's going to it uses credSSP just in case I need to hop somewhere else to grab bits to install. So it's going to do all that. So if it needs to, it'll make some edits to my to my local policy, and just do it. You know, if it has to, it'll actually shut down the VM. It'll mount the VHDs, pop open the registry, and basically open up WMI, so that it can get through WMI and enable enable PowerShell remoting. Now, for this VM, and for the sake of time, I've already done all that, because that, you know, it has to go through each step, and you know, the timeouts, and it can take a little bit. So, but that's what this initial command does. The other thing that's important to notice about this command is this bit right here, the checkpoint name. What this does, if this is optional, and this will restore the VM to this checkpoint before starting. This is a great way to test. So if I want to continually go back to some kind of a clean or known state, I can use this. And it can use this both for Hyper-V, which is what we're using. Boxstarter also supports Azure IaaS VMs. And while Azure VMs don't necessarily support checkpoint, you know, native checkpointing out of the box, what Boxstarter will do is it uses blob storage and creates copies of the disks and basically manages checkpoints that way. It's much more time consuming because you have to move those disks around, whereas Hyper-V is pretty, you know, practically instantaneous. I'm gonna remove that just for this purpose, just to make this a little faster. So because it's gonna have to stop the VM and restore it and then bring it back up. And so just for the sake of brevity, I've already set in this session a variable for C. This is that's my admin creds for the box. So it's basically it's gonna get essentially an endpoint and pipe that endpoint to install Boxstarter package. Install Boxstarter package can then use that endpoint to create a remote session and get on the box and run the actual package. So, and you'll notice here, package name is Wrock Lite. So now I have a package name. Now this package lives locally, so it's aware of where my local repository is, and it's going to copy the files in my local repo to the remote machine, so they can access them there and install. So, and I've got verbosity turned on, and as you'll see, there will be plenty of information to see. So it tests to make sure that it's checking to see if remoting is up or not. This is one of the weird things that I've been having. Okay, good, it got through. I didn't have to do anything funky there. One thing that it does when it sets up the CRED SSP, if it's not already set up, so there's certain things that Boxstarter will have to create scheduled tasks for, things like installing Windows updates, installing Windows features. Any MSI install, it runs through a scheduled task simply because most would work, but some won't. For example, installing SQL Server or installing .NET framework, those leverage Windows the Windows Update server and can't work with pure remoting. So it creates a scheduled task and essentially streams the text, the output of that scheduled task, through to a file, and then it listens for that file and streams that back to the console. So it looks and feels like it's a live session, but it's actually taking place in a different process. So you can see now that it for whatever reason it saw that it needed to restart. So the server shut down, and now it's waiting for it to come back up. And this sometimes can take a while. Sometimes, and I'm not real sure why this is. I've talked to other people, and apparently, and you know, even though the box may come back up for whatever reason, sometimes it could take 30, 45 seconds for Boxstarter to actually see that box. So rather than just kind of waiting here in awkward silence as this passes on, we're going to let this thing go ahead and take its course. And while it's doing that, talk a little bit about testing. So one of the more recent developments I have with Boxstarter is a test runner. And one of the reasons why I created that was just, you know, throughout the development of Boxstarter and throughout maintaining the Chocolatey packages that I maintain, I thought, well, gee, it would be nice if I could have a test runner that can basically just run through my packages. It could go ahead and run whatever packages have changed since they've been published. And if they passed, it could it could go ahead and publish that to the to a repository. So we're going to go, and I've got just, so here's some points that I consider important with testing. I need to know that I may be able to get this box or this script to build, but the real question is can I get it to build again and again and again and again? Can I have a way of checking to see that it built successfully without having to hop on the box, look at every single little setting that I had the script set? There could be a lot of settings in terms of security settings, features set, files moved around. It'd be nice if all that could be taken care of for me. And then what if maybe I want to have that testing just happen automatically? Perhaps every single time I do a source control commit. So it would be great if I could tie this into continuous integration, and maybe even have that tie into continuous deployment, and actually deploy those packages to a package repository for me. So let's take a quick look and see how it's still going on. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and open up a different console here. And let's see into where I was there. And I'm gonna import the Boxstarter modules. Now, when you install Boxstarter, it puts itself in it puts the directory that it installs into the PS modules environment. So typically all that stuff can be auto-loaded, but because I continually am debbing on okay, you can see it came back up and it's continuing now. But as I'm continually developing this, it's easier for me just to go ahead and manually import them from where I developed them. So let's see. I want a different one. Okay, so go ahead and import that, and because I'm going to so let me just make sure that it knows where my local repo is. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So we're at demo repo. That's right where we are. So now these commands will work. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy these commands. You'll see them in just a minute here, in a moment. So this is how I would set up testing and then actually publishing a successful package. So these are just a series of commands piped into each other. So the first is test Boxstarter package. This is going to actually run the package. And let me jump back and show you something else here real quick. So this is actually very important. Boxstarter needs to know when it's running its test. It needs to have some context about where it's going to run the test. You probably don't want to run your test locally because this is going to typically these packages are going to change the state of the machine. So this is the get Boxstarter deploy options. There's also a set Boxstarter deploy options, which is how you would set this information. And what this basically says is go ahead and revert to, roll back to this good checkpoint. Use Hyper-V. This is my API key for, in this case, I'm going to use myget. Myget is it's a public NuGet package repository that I can throw packages on. This particular feed is a public feed. So, and in fact, anybody listening is free to use this feed. I specifically created this feed as a community feed for people to throw their packages. It's usually better to put your Boxstarter packages on myget and not on chocolatey.org. And chocolatey.org is really intended for packages that could be used by anybody and are often geared towards a specific piece of software. Whereas this, especially this particular package, is really makes sense to me and might not make sense to somebody else. I don't want to really kind of clutter up the Chocolatey repo with this package. And it can take an array of in this case, as I'm using Hyper-V, it can take an array of Hyper-V VM names. I'm just going to give it one, but typically when I'm actually testing packages that I send up to Chocolatey, I will have two machines, one machine that's based usually a Win 8.1 or a Win 2012 machine, and then maybe a Win 7 or a Win 2008 R2 machine. Basically, I'm testing for PowerShell version 2 and PowerShell 3 plus, since there's a lot of breaking changes that I ran into. I just find that it's a good idea to run your packages through both of those runtimes. So this is what it's going to use. I've got my credentials stored, so it has everything it needs, and now I can use this simple set of commands, without passing a bunch of parameters to kick off a test. So this is going to run the test. It's going to iterate through each of my machines. In this case, I just have one. It's going to pipe the results of the test to this select commandlet, and what this does is it's going to analyze the results, and it's going to look for packages that pass on all of the machines that they were tested on. And so it filters down that set of packages and sends that off to publish Boxstarter package, and publish Boxstarter package will do the actual publishing. In this case, it'll use my API key up here to publish it to this feed right here. And so if everything goes right, I should be able to hop on myget.org and actually see my package there. So I'm going to, before I actually launch this, let's go ahead and take a look what happened over here. Okay, so it looks like everything worked. Everything went well. And this tells me that there were no errors. So this would have registered as a passed test. This is the actual DNS name of that VM. It actually was able to make it all the way through, and I get kind of some timing. So it took about 5 minutes. So let me switch back over here. We'll go ahead and kick this off, and again, while this is running, so and you'll notice too that output's a little bit different here. So here I'm making more use of the progress stream, and if you want, you could give it the verbose switch, in which case you will see very similar output to what you saw before, but with the default output essentially looks like this. So I can see the package that it's on and the machine that's testing on. And one thing to note too, when this command runs, test Boxstarter package, what that does, it doesn't necessarily test every single package in your repository. I have about 50 in my day-to-day Chocolatey repo. What it does is it looks at the version of the package that's local, and it looks at the version of the package that's published to the feed that's associated with that package. And if the local version is higher than the published version, then it tags that package for testing. In this case, there is nothing published, so it's going to see, okay, I need to test this, and you can see here okay, so it's already finished, it's passed, and now it should be trying to go ahead and publish it to myget. So while that's happening, let's go ahead and move on, and let's take a look at how we can take this to the next step and how we could plug this into a CI version. So as we saw a little bit ago, there's this set of scripts that Boxstarter installs. And so what this is we've got a MS build script. This is really just a shell for this PowerShell script. And then we also have this bootstrap script, because it could be that your build system is a host. Maybe you're using Visual Studio Online, the TFS build servers on Visual Studio Online, which basically leverage VMs, and every single time a build runs, it wipes that machine. So there is no context. There's no Boxstarter modules pre-installed on that machine. So this bootstrap command basically does everything that needs to happen just to get Boxstarter and any other needed bits on the box. And by the way, so this does work with Visual Studio Online for free. You can get an account there. You get 5 hours free of build hours a month. Depending on the size of your packages. I have one package that takes an hour to build with Windows updates and all that. And they just recently cut down the hours to 5 a month. It used to be like unlimited. So it's kind of sad to see see that go. But what I have what I'm going to show you now, I have an Azure VM that I host both the TFS on-prem version, and I also have a TeamCity. In theory, this should be able to work with any modern build system, Jenkins, or anything else that that you use. I'm going to show TeamCity. I like the way that the output works in TeamCity. It's a little bit easier for me to read. If I were to actually push this to my actual repository that this CI system watches, I would see in a few seconds a little spinning wheel start up here. So for those of you that are not familiar with continuous integration or even TeamCity, this is simply a piece of software that sits, in my case, it sits on my Azure VM. So I'm just hitting it through its web interface here. What it does is you can tell it to watch a source control repository. TeamCity can work with Git. Works with all of the major source control versions: Git, SVN, Mercurial, TFS, and so it's continually polling that repo for new commits. And when it sees a new commit, and by the way, you can configure this all sorts of different ways. Maybe I'm more cautious and I don't want it to start a build on a new commit. Maybe I only want it to start a build when I actually tell it to start a build. But in my case, I have it set up so on new commits it'll start a build. And so essentially what it'll do, I'll just give you a little view into how this ties into the actual scripts. So I'm just going to go into the admin to the setup of this and jump off to, let's see, where is it? Build schedule. Where do you build steps? Probably right in front of me. I'm just not seeing it. Let's see. So this is the actual Git repo that it's watching. So I plugged in my GitHub repository. I've got parameters plugged in. So I have parameters that have my credentials for my Azure boxes that it actually runs the builds on. So I have a couple dedicated Azure instances that it will send builds off to and get tested there. Obviously since the build server is hosted on Azure, Hyper-V just won't work. Unfortunately, Azure takes longer because of the checkpoints and all that. But it's what I have. So I'm trying to find the actual build steps. Let's see, I might be in the wrong spot altogether. This is root. I'm gonna go back here. Let's there's another way I can see it. So here's all the parameters. So I give it like my and I'm going to create a new Azure certificate here when I'm done with this presentation. But it's got my Azure certificate, so it can access all my Azure resources, storage.
And seeing whatever you're sharing right this second.
Oh, of course, because I have it on the wrong screen. There we go. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay. I apologize for that. So these are my parameters, and so this is TeamCity. So yeah, it looks like the last few minutes you haven't seen what I've been presenting, but here it is. So you can see my last build was successful. And let's take a look at the output of that build. Almost there. So it's a lot of information that for the most part is entirely uninteresting. We'll just go ahead and skip down to the bottom. So it does 2 machines. You can kind of see the last machine here, Wrock test 2K8R2. That's one of my Azure VMs that it tested on. That test was successful. It must have been successful on Wrock test 2012 as well, because it succeeded and it published this version 1.0.1, which I've since actually deleted from my Get. It's no longer there, but it was able to publish that, and that was all without me having to really do anything. The only thing I had to do was actually push my local copy via source control, via Git, to GitHub, and then this saw that and was able to actually.
Matt, sorry to interrupt. Can you zoom in on that text a little bit, make it bigger?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, this is pretty dense. How's that? Is that better?
It's a little better, yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so let me skip down to the bottom again. You just kind of see that. What I do is I do turn the verbosity up for the log, just simply because if anything goes wrong, and since this all happened on a build server, you're not actually watching it in real time. It helps you troubleshoot any possible problems that might have occurred. Here again, you can see that it succeeded, and this is the feed. This URL is the myget feed that it published itself to. Let's now that some time has passed and the actual build that we kicked off here has finished. So this is 1.0.5, which is what I gave it. Let's go ahead and go to myget, and I'm going to refresh this thing, see if we should. There it is. So it works. So this is 1.0.5 myget. This is the myget Boxstarter feed. This is one of the feeds that Boxstarter by default will look for packages. So by default, you can configure it to add or remove other repositories. But by default, it checks the Chocolatey public repo. It checks this feed here on myget, and it checks your local repository. The local repository always has the highest precedence. So that's cool. Then I kind of see how the continuous deployment could possibly work from end to end. And I've got some resources that, again, I'll include this, put this deck somewhere where everyone can find it, and you might find some of these links helpful. So now I'd like to kind of jump ahead and change topics real quick and talk about some other tools out there that aren't necessarily part of Boxstarter, but that have been using a lot lately that really make testing and development of automation a much more friendly experience. So first I'm going to talk about Vagrant. I don't know if many of you have heard or worked with Vagrant. Vagrant is very popular in the I'd say in the open source and much more so in the non-Windows world. Up until fairly recently, it wasn't really Windows friendly at all. Now I'd say it's more Windows friendly, not incredibly Windows friendly, but it's getting there. This is all open source. In fact, I have a couple contributions I've made just a couple weeks ago that will hopefully make it a little better, and hopefully people will keep adding on to that. So what is Vagrant? So let's talk about what do you do when you've got a VM, let's say, and you want to share that VM? So I've got my VM here locally, and now maybe I want to share that experience with somebody else. Well, if you work, for the same company, it might be fairly simple. Maybe you share some kind of corporate, private cloud or even a public cloud that you can kind of, share your credentials on. What I've done in the past on some open source projects is, if I'm in a kind of a bind, we just can't repro somebody's problem, maybe I'll spin up an EC2 instance, give somebody temporary admin credentials on the box, and have them go there. It's not the most ideal situation. What Vagrant does is it makes this scenario incredibly easy, along with some other scenarios as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to hop on to my actual Chocolatey repository. So these are all my Chocolatey packages that I maintain. And there's a file in this repository called Vagrant file. And what Vagrant does is it's basically a hypervisor agnostic way of delivering VM images and even having the ability to ensure that those VM images get built in a certain way. So Vagrant has two key components to it. It has a provisioner and a provider component. And we'll talk about the provider first. So Vagrant has this notion of a box. That's kind of the lingo for Vagrant. And real quick, I'm going to go to I can't really see. Here we go. So this is Vagrant Cloud. This is where you can store these boxes. You can store them elsewhere here, but this is kind of convenient. So here are my boxes that I have up here. So what is a box, right? So here's my Windows 2012. This is the evaluation copy. And for those of you that don't know, you don't need a license to test Windows boxes. Microsoft provides a place where you can actually download evaluation copies, and once that evaluation ends, you can just go away the box and download a new evaluation copy and start over. That's totally legit. So this has a Hyper-V box, and basically all this is a bit of metadata here that points to a file in my Azure Cloud Storage that has an actual VHD, Hyper-V VHD zipped up with a couple other small little bits of metadata that Vagrant can use to spin up that box. I could conceivably have I could add other boxes to my Windows 2012 R2 box here. I could add VirtualBox. I could add VMware Fusion, Parallels. There's lots of providers that are supported by Vagrant. But in the end, all I have to put in my source control, so somebody that might want to contribute to my Chocolatey repo, maybe there's an update for one of these guys, and rather than asking me, and this happens sometimes, somebody will just send a pull request. Maybe it might be nice for them to be able to have a place to test that other than their local machine. Well, what they can do if they have Vagrant installed is they can spin up that Vagrant. So let's see. I'm going to go to here, and I have to be in the same directory as my Vagrant file for this really to work. And I have a box, and we'll take a look at it. So I've already downloaded this box, but what I can do is, let's just say I'm starting off fresh. All I have is my repo with this one file. If I were to say Vagrant up, if I were to type in just Vagrant space up, and find that file, it's going to see, I don't see this box locally, because there's a particular common place on your machine where Vagrant stores those files. It's going to go off to my Azure storage drive, copy that zipped up VHD. Now it's going to take a while because it's about 4 gigs, but it will copy that, pull that down, it'll clone it, create a Hyper-V instance for it, and I'm ready to go. I think I might actually have this guy open. Yeah, I do. So, so in the end, this is what I get. Now, the other thing that Vagrant has that's super nifty is this concept that it calls a shared folder. So you can specify, and I've got in my Vagrant file here, I'm basically telling it I've got a synced folder, and I want you to sync the current directory of wherever this file is, the Vagrant file is located. So basically, it's going to sync the root of my Chocolatey repository with, essentially, it's going to make it into a network share. And so I can, in the comfort of my own environment, in my own text editor, make changes to packages, and then hop onto this box. And because all the changes that I make are basically seen locally on that box, I can test them there. So let's go ahead just real quick and do that. So some of you might be aware this week, Windows Azure publish an update to the Windows Azure PowerShell module. I have currently 0.8.5 on Chocolatey. They're now at 0.8.6. So I want to make that change. So I'm going to change my, this is the metadata, and here you can kind of see what a larger new spec looks like. And here is the actual script that installs it. And, like I say, these scripts are just PowerShell, so they can have whatever it is that you need to get the job done. This is going to go. It's going to look locally to see if they already have it. If they do, it's going to tell them, you already have this. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go back to my command line. I am going to build that package. And I have to tell Boxstarter now that my package is here, not our demo spot where we had it before. So let's see. Deployment options. Oh, no, that's not the one I want. Oops. Yeah. Okay, cool. And now I'm going to build this. Oops, or invoke. Let's grab the ID. These are really what the names are. Whoops. All right. Great. That's built. When it builds it, it basically puts that new peg file in the root of my directory. So I should have access to that same file over here. So here I am. I'm on my VM, and I'm just going to bring up PowerShell. And we're not going to use, this is just a straight up Chocolatey install. I'm not really going through Boxstarter in this case. And I'm going to type in cnst. So this is basically Chocolatey install, Windows PowerShell, and I'm going to say source. So by default, it would go off to Chocolatey and look for it. But I'm going to say, actually, I want you to look here. So Vagrant is the shared, when it shares my my Chocolatey repo, the share name is Vagrant. So I'm going to go ahead and enter, in theory, we'll work 0.8.5. Was that? Oh, actually, I want 0.8.6. Let's see. The right one here. Oh, that's why. I misspelled source, and so it didn't know what to do, so I just went off to the actual to the Chocolatey repo instead. So URCE, yes, that is how you spell source. And now, yeah, there we go, 8.6. So just gonna make sure before if I were somebody that was submitting a PR to my repo, I want to just kind of make sure and see that this works. Because at least if you're me, you'll find that often it doesn't because you have lots of typos. So okay, great, awesome. We're running low on time, but there's something I really want to show you that kind of takes this to the next level, and that is something called TestKitchen. TestKitchen. So what we've seen so far is how to test. The way that we've tested this so far is we're just simply installing the package, which actually goes quite a long way. I kind of think of this, for those software developers out there, this is kind of like the unit test that is the compilation of your program, but not the actual unit tests themselves. All this tells me is that install, but I don't know, like, maybe there's some intricate stuff that I have in this package. I want to test all those details. I have ideas for how to extend this test runner to be able to do that. But let me show you some stuff that's out there that we can leverage to actually do that I think is pretty cool. So where I work, we use Chef to build up our infrastructure, and along with Chef, there's all sorts of other tools and plugins that you have for doing various infrastructure-related stuff. One of the popular tools is called TestKitchen, and let me bring up my an area where I have a TestKitchen test. Here we go. So first of all, just a little bit of background on this. So I created, for those of you that are familiar with Chef, it's essentially the equivalent of DSC in the non-Windows world. Well, it works on Windows as well. And in fact, there's been a lot of partnering with DSC and Chef. And I believe just this week they announced that now publicly in your Chef recipes, so everything in the Chef world is like kitchen or somewhat food related, which really makes Googling for it a lot of fun. But they announced that in your Chef recipes, you can include DSC resources, which is pretty cool. So you can basically use Chef as a runner and include all of your DSC resources embedded within your Chef recipe. If you're a Chef shop, especially if you're in a mixed shop where you're doing a lot of Linux, Unix, machine build-outs, that may make a lot of sense for you. So in Chef land, you've got recipes and you've got cookbooks. So for example, if I wanted to install, let's say, the Apache web server, I would find the Apache cookbook, and that's going to have various recipes that are related to installing bits and pieces of Apache. And one thing that I've done recently is I've created a Boxstarter cookbook. That you can essentially embed bits of Boxstarter in your Chef recipes that may come in handy if you have something that you know is going to reboot your machine, or maybe you want to use some of the Boxstarter commands that tweak the Windows taskbar or do other kind of Windows tweaks that aren't necessarily part of Chef. You can then pull that in. And the way that essentially looks is, let's see, where is it? Oh, I'm in the wrong repo here. Let's see. I want to be. Here we go. This is where I want to be. So my recipe, I've got the sample recipe. This is how a recipe might look. Very similar to what we saw. Again, this is a Chef. This is all Chef-ized. In fact, this is actually technically this is Ruby, but I've embedded this bit of code that will be run as PowerShell. For the sakes of our testing that we're about to do, I've commented out the install Windows update, simply because I don't, as much as, I like just as much as anybody to watch Windows updates go for hours and hours. We're not going to do that today. So I want to see, I want to test different bits of this. So the way this works, and this works alongside of Vagrant, is this thing called Kitchen. So in the root of my cookbook repo here, I have this file called Kitchen. This is a YAML format, and this basically gives it some context. It tells it this is my Vagrant file that has kind of some things that you need to know in order to start up a VM in which to do the testing. And TestKitchen follows a convention, which is it'll look for a folder called test, and in there it's going to look for a folder called integration, and I might have various test suites. Here I just have this default test suite, so I'll look in here, and ServerSpec, TestKitchen supports all sorts of different test runners. ServerSpec is the test runner that we're going to look at. There's been some talk of actually bringing something like Pester as a test runner into TestKitchen. That would be pretty cool, since it's pure PowerShell. But even in my ServerSpec test, I've got I can do PowerShell. And what ServerSpec is, and again, these tools are very Ruby based, but if you take a look at this, you don't really have to know Ruby. And there's tons of samples on their site where you can cull this information. But let's just take a look at this. So what this does, the first thing it's going to do is ShefSpec exposes this file resource. And so that's going to just say this guy should be a file. Like, this might say it should be a directory. Like maybe I have a file that has no extension, and in the Linux world it's very common to have files without extensions. But this just makes sure that this guy exists and that he's a file. He also is going to check to see that the Windows feature web server is installed. And as most of you know, you can install Windows features in various ways through PowerShell or through DISM. And based on whether or not you use DISM or PowerShell, those features have different names. And so this is going to say use the PowerShell name to check. This is going to check for a registry key, so I've asked it to expose hidden files, and this is basically going to make sure that gets turned on. This is going to, now this resource, the command resource, I can throw in just any old PowerShell in here, and it can be multi-line too. Before in Ruby you have this convention where you do this this less than, so I could do something like this and put in however much PowerShell I want. I mean, I could even embed a PowerShell module into here and have it call out to that module if I wanted to, but I don't want to. And this is going to check the execution policy. This isn't checking absolutely every aspect of my package. I kind of threw this together today. I have another package that I actually do my real testing for this cookbook, but I thought this would be better to illustrate this. So now, to actually do the testing, because I have TestKitchen installed on my box, I'm going to go ahead and jump off to, here we go. So this particular directory is my Boxstarter cookbook directory. So first of all, I'm going to just do a kitchen list. One thing you may have noticed is all of these, the vast majority of these tools are purely command line. Not a whole lot of GUIs out there, but once you become familiar with the tool, it actually I have actually found that it's much more natural and to use on the command line than to use a GUI, for me at any rate. So here I can see this is what I've got here. So TestKitchen knows that I'm using the Vagrant Windows driver. So again, the TestKitchen, just like Vagrant, can use all sorts of different drivers. Maybe I'm in a VMware shop, and I want to test on an instance in my vSphere cloud. So I would use the vSphere TestKitchen driver for that. Maybe I'm in EC2. There's an EC2 driver. There's all sorts of you name it, most likely your cloud provider is going to be included here. This is basically, Chef Zero is just simply a Chef runner that runs locally. So it's not going to try and go to a Chef server. In the DSC world, I believe that's called a pull server. But this is all local. What it tells me is what it last did was it verified this. In other words, it already ran the tests, and there's lots of different commands I could issue here to run different actions. So for example, I could run kitchen test, and this is what I might have tied into a CI, a continuous integration repository. So for example, where I work, we're a chef shop. All of our recipes are tied to a Team City instance. So just like you saw in my Team City VM, I had that one CI for my Chocolatey repo. We have a separate test that we run for all of our cookbooks that test that. So as soon as anybody checks in cookbook code, it'll run through tests like these, where it'll actually hop onto a remote box. We might use Docker. Some of you are familiar with that for some of our Linux images because that's really fast and lightweight. Or we might actually spin up a vSphere image since we're a VM shop as well and run the test there. So what Kitchen Test does is this basically runs the whole thing. It'll look for if there's already a VM out there. It'll shut that. It'll basically break that VM down and destroy it. Then it'll create a new VM in its place. It's going to then do what's called a convergence, which basically runs through the recipe and actually runs the recipe on the box. In this case, it would actually install Chef on that box as well, so it can do that. Then it does a verify and runs through the test that I have to check out and make sure that everything worked. And we're running short on time, so we're not going to actually run this. But you can actually see here's the output of my last kitchen verify. So you can kind of parse out here. First of all, it all passed. I don't see any red here. It says, okay, that should be a file. This is white and blue, so I know that it really was a file. This guy should be installed. This guy should have property value hidden. Just real quick, so you know that I'm not lying to you. Let's just save that. And I'm going to do a kitchen verify. So this is just going to take what's already converged on the box. It's not going to try and rerun it. It's just going to rerun the test. That's all. So verify. And it's going to do kind of just some initial Vagrant hookup. So I'm using the Vagrant driver. So it's getting, it's reaching out to a VM using Vagrant. And yep, there you go. Failed. And I get a bunch of ugly red stuff with some not so useful error messages. One thing to note with TestKitchen is it's just recently starting to get some Windows love. If you were to install what's publicly available from TestKitchen, that there's some WinRM stuff missing from there that's not possible to test Windows boxes. In the notes, I'll include what is currently a fork, but the fork is maintained by an employee of OpsCode, which is basically the same company as Chef. Well, actually, they're called Chef now. And you can expect to see this in the final TestKitchen bits. I believe they're coming up on version 2 once that's released. But if you want to use it now, pull down that Git repo and just lay that over your current TestKitchen install, and you would be able to test Windows boxes just like this. Since it's after 4, I don't want to lose anybody. I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. Though I do just want to note that in the deck here, I've included a couple other links just in case I had time. We didn't really. These were some things that we might have looked at later. So Docker. This is not a Windows technology, but if you're a mixed shop, this is definitely something you want to look into. So one of the most painful parts of my experience of automation testing is waiting. You spend a lot of time waiting during the provisioning process, and you learn there's tips and tricks, using snapshots and depending on your hypervisor technology, stuff to get around that. But anything that you can do though to decrease that feedback time is going to increase your productivity. And what Docker does, it's basically the VMs on steroids. They're not VMs. They look like a VM. So it would look like a typical Linux VM when you can SSH into a Docker instance, and it looks like everything you would expect to see on a normal Linux instance. But it's much more. We're talking. It's like it can be less than a meg. So a VM, you may provision that. It may take a few minutes. It may take 10 minutes for depending on what you're doing. These guys can be provisioned in milliseconds. And they also provide ways where you can really kind of modularize your infrastructure and provide some really interesting models beyond just testing. But here's the link to that if you're interested in that. You'll notice these both have I/O extensions, so they're both very cool technologies. Packer I/O. This is made by the same guy that makes Vagrant. This is a tool for creating images. So, a lot of places, and some places that I worked at in the past, they didn't use tools like DSC or Chef or Puppet. Instead, they just kind of create an image. That's great because it's really fast to spin up an image. You don't have to go through an install process, but it's horrible in the sense that you've lost the knowledge of what it took to create that instance, and once you need to update it, you've got an image, and it's just like a binary file. You can't really get in there and update it easily. So Packer basically allows you to create an image, but also create a means of like a configuration file. And so it's really you kind of think of it as images as code. And I've got these, it really plays into these two terms, which are kind of becoming buzzwords in the space, immutable infrastructure. So instead of actually updating our applications as they change, we just tear down the boxes and create new ones. And Brown and Serve, which is, I don't know if anybody has heard that term, but basically it's something that kind of Packer supports, where you may support a base image that's brown. It's not fully baked yet, but it has a lot of the kind of the tedious time, maybe it has Windows updates installed, a lot of that stuff, and then on top you might just have some lightweight configuration management stuff that you would run on top of that. So definitely visit these links and check them out. And that's I think that pretty much covers everything that I want to talk about.
Well, awesome, Matt. Thank you very much.
One other thing, I just like to just a little plug. So I work for CenturyLink Cloud. We're a fairly new cloud provider out here in the Pacific Northwest in Bellevue. We are currently hiring. So if you like doing this kind of thing and want to get paid for it, we need you. So please, ping me on Twitter or email. Look us up, CenturyLinkCloud.com. We were recently bought out by CenturyLink. It used to be called Tier 3, but some really exciting stuff. And if you like this stuff, I think you'd like working for CenturyLink Cloud.
Well,
thank you very much for.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. We have a couple questions that were posted in chat. Basically, where do you see Boxstarter? How does it fit or play into, the usage of other tools like DSC, Chef, and Puppet?
That's a great question. So, Boxstarter is by no means and never will be a replacement for those tools. What Boxstarter's real, I think, real target audience is. I have my own personal computer. I want to build that up. I don't want to worry about. So there's a big learning curve when it comes to Chef and Puppet and DSC, and there's some infrastructure involved as well. So if I just want something simple, like as you saw, I didn't have to have any software at all. I can hop on a box and get that set up. It's great for for those lightweight experiences. And I also want to provide some tie-ins to things like DSC. So one of the plans that I have is I'd like to, just like Chef is doing, I'd like to be able to actually be able to embed DSC resources in a Boxstarter script. So if you're familiar with DSC and you want to include that in a Boxstarter script, then that's great. But one of the things that Boxstarter can do that, so, as far as I know, none of the other products can do is, and this isn't particularly difficult, just nobody's gone to the trouble, is actually be able to run on the local machine and instead of running from a different machine and go through the whole reboot process and make the box right.
So very cool. Follow-up question to that from myself is how do you see Boxstarter? Is it a complete replacement for a tool like MDT, Microsoft's offering for like generating a reference? I mean, short of being fully supported by the vendor, does Boxstarter offer you that bare bones base image to completely customized?
Yeah, so that's I've thought about, and who knows, maybe sometime I will. I have, unfortunately, time is finite, but I've thought about including stuff like actually doing like the answer file and this prep, and actually really taking it beyond just an installed OS. I'll also tell you that I don't have much experience with MDT, so I can't really talk to that. But really, Boxstarter, the areas where I like to develop Boxstarter is I like to have it appeal more to people that either aren't quite so technical. I'd like to eventually get it so that you can create Boxstarter packages without touching a command line or at least touching script. And I've got some ideas for how to do that. We're really, tools like MDT, that's meant for the technical community. And I think something like Boxstarter will always be used, or mainly be used by people that are somewhat technically proficient. But it's definitely I'm aiming for a much lower bar.
And contributions to Boxstarter project are welcome. And if somebody wanted to contribute, where would they go for that?
Great question. They are absolutely welcome. Taking some contributions. So one thing that I plan on changing very soon, it's on CodePlex. So I used to work very closely with the people that worked in CodePlex when I worked at Microsoft, and I still have a place in my heart for it. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to get contributors on CodePlex. So I do plan on moving it to GitHub. Soon, like within the month, likely. And so it's definitely open for contributions. One thing I need to do, you're welcome to contribute sooner, but I think it would be helpful if I had like a contributors page that kind of got you up and running on it. But yes, absolutely open to contributors. That would be awesome.
All right, cool. Does anybody have a question for Matt? No? Well, I don't want to hold you up, Matt. Thank you so much again for presenting for us. It's very cool stuff.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too. We'll post up the link to the video afterwards up on that we'll put on YouTube, and if you can forward along any of the materials that you wanted to share, we can post that to our GitHub repo as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.